And so I'm going to hand over to our wonderful students who will be hosting this session. But before we start, going to make sure to production team, are we online? Thumbs up. Can I have a thumbs up?
I'll try from the side.
Good to go. And over to you.
Hi everybody, welcome to day 4 at Rosenberg House, and today's topic is going to be about peace and equity with the themes of youth diplomacy, moral imagination, and governance. The guiding question of today is going to be, how are young minds leading new models of peace building and what support do they need? Our today's moderators is Sophia.
Everybody deserves a drum roll.
Anna Rold, CEO, Diplomatic Courier and World in 2050. And me and Sophia B.
And our guests, and then one drum roll for collectively for the guests.
And for today's guests, we have Dr. George Zadowski, Dr. Arvid Bell, James Nicolay, and Shay Rain Martin.
Can you tell us where they're from? So we know.
Yes, sorry. So, Dr. Shane Sorowski, Editor-in-Chief, Diplomatic Career, Executive Director of World in 2050.
Who's now being stepped into by our previous guest.
Shane Ray Martin. Sorry. We have Dr. George Zadarski, CEO and founder, Vaxabre, author of Cyber Republic. Dr. Arvid Bell, CEO and co-founder of Anadar Horizon. And James Nicolay, CEO, Midwatch Corp.
Hello, my name is Sophia. I'm a student from Rosenberg and I'm in grade 11 and I would like to ask all of you a few questions today. But first of all, I would like to start with Dr. George. So how do AI and digital platforms change governance and diplomacy, and where are they increasing polarization versus enabling new democratic models?
Okay, maybe I need half an hour for that. Can you hear me here or?
You do.
I do? Okay, fine. So let's first reflect a little bit on that word governance so we make sure that everybody understands the same thing. I believe that many people, when they think of this word, they probably think some kind of distribution of power. So we have, the question of who actually, takes decisions, right, in a group of people about something. So that's one way of thinking about governance, but I think this is a very sort of low-level, very technocratic way of thinking about governance. So I would like to suggest to you another way of thinking about it. So governance is what we do with human communities when we seek the truth. Okay? So if you think about it this way, right, you have to also think what does truth means. And let me just spend just a couple of seconds there because I will be able to answer your questions after that. So there are two kinds of truths, if you like. One is called the justifiable truth, and essentially this means trying to discover what is already there so that you can get someone to justify you. That means, for example, you're in a theocratic system, so the truths are what the chiefs, the supreme leader says. Or you're in a dictatorship, then you try to discover the truth that will appease the dictator, okay? So you understand where I'm going with that. So you have authoritarian governance systems that essentially trying to discover those justifiable truths, okay? You don't want to go that way. I'll explain to you why. Because the other kind of truth is a better one. The other kind of truth is called falsifiable truth. So it's imperfect to the point that Shoin made before, right? Don't worry for perfection, okay? Worry for imperfection that you can continuously improve. And that is what we've been taught by enlightenment, okay? This is the basis of our civilization, right? How we discover falsifiable truths. So think of governance systems that can discover those falsifiable truths. And there's only one type of system that can do that, and that's a democratic system, okay? And by that I mean a polity of people who are equal. You have to be equal in a democracy, right? So you have an equal voice, okay? are people who are free, because in this polity you should be able to have the moral or other kinds of imagination to imagine solutions, explanations freely, right, and not bound by some kind of authority. Okay, but also very importantly, talking about responsibilities, to have the responsibility of listening others, criticizing what you're trying to say. Okay, so if we lay the foundations of democratic governance like that, you will have probably a goal to aspire towards. Okay, so I don't want to turn this into a lecture, but just going to tie it a little bit with AI. So think of AI as tools that can support that kind of vision, that kind of framework. Okay, how can we repurpose AI in order to have those fundamental blocks of democratic governance? You know, a free people, people who dare to speak, but also people who feel the responsibility to criticize and also be criticized. Because through this process, we can fool ourselves less as we move forward. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And for our second question to you, we'd like to ask, what's one governance design you'd propose that strengthens peace and legitimacy in an age of intelligent machines?
Okay, so I'll give you a practical example, based on what I just said. Okay, my team and I looked into a lot of methodologies and tools that already exist in political science for something called deliberative democracy. Okay, so deliberative democracy is taking those principles that I just mentioned and developing ways so people can have structured conversations as they discover the truths, okay, together. Okay, so this is called deliberative democracy. All right, and it requires a lot of human facilitation. It requires a lot of things that need to be done in a manual way, traditionally, since the time of ancient Athens. Okay, so my team and I have built a startup, a company called Voxiberate, okay, where we've taken those methods, those political methods, and we looked at them, we analyzed them, and we're using AI to automate many of those tasks. And we have produced an online platform that is available for human communities to use in order to implement those democratic governance models that I was speaking before. Okay, so that is like our path so far, and that's how we thought about it. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much.
So, Dr. Arvid, my next question is for you, but before that, I saw that you make notes. Do you want to add anything to what Dr. George was saying? No? Okay. So my question is, from a security and risk lens, what are early warning signs a region is moving toward instability, and how can youth networks help detect them ethically?
All right, so first, thanks for the invitation. Lovely to be here. So the second part of the question I really have, it's a great question. I really have no idea. That's a very good question. I don't know how youth networks would have this powerful insight. I think it's putting a lot of pressure on young people to do that. I'm not sure. Maybe someone has a brilliant idea. But the first one I can say a little bit about. So, I would always start with questioning how we think about peace and war. And if you listen carefully to how we even talk about it, we often say, war has erupted in the Middle East or something like that, right? And so we're treating wars like earthquakes, and that's incorrect, because no war has ever really erupted. Every single war in the history of mankind has started because people decided to go to war, right? So it's people who decide to choose violence over peace, right? So that means some of the early warning signs, and we can go into details what these are, have to do with humans and their behavior, their intentions, their ideologies, their biases, their assumptions. And so fundamentally, it's probably a good idea to start with us and ask ourselves. So where are we maybe making some assumptions about other people or about the world that are maybe not setting us on a course towards peace, but towards escalation? So I would probably start there.
Thank you very much.
And for our second question, we'd like to ask, what's one practical way to connect youth-led peace initiatives with decision makers without compromising youth safety?
Also a very interesting question. So there I can say something interesting about. So even though I'm now running a tech company, in part of my previous life, I worked in political science, conflict management. We found something very interesting, which is counterintuitive about inclusion. And it goes a little bit against something we heard on the previous panel. So on the previous panel, we heard everything about you got to be in the room where decisions are being made, and you got to fight your way into that. And that's not wrong as like an aspiration, right? You definitely should, just aim to be at the table. So I'm not saying don't do that. But what's often overlooked, and there's some very interesting strand of research in negotiation science, is that very often indirect influence can be much more powerful than direct influence. Okay, so meaning if, I recall one engagement we did, it had to do with conflict and what you call protracted asymmetric conflict, right? So like civil war environments, okay? And it wasn't so much that civil society groups, and by extension that would apply to younger people, it wasn't so much that they were marginalized when they didn't have a seat at the table. That's a little bit too simplistic. It's more like you were marginalized if you didn't have that seat, and in addition to that, you didn't have anyone at the table who would also stand up for you. So sometimes that means maybe, yes, it's great to be very ambitious and figure out what's your strategy to get to get the seat at the table. And maybe ask yourself, if we think of this entire like conflict environment as like a network of relationships, we heard like a lot about relationships previously, right? So what is a relationship that you can rely on to have someone speak up for you and stand up for you, right? So, and that also is like a little bit easier to accomplish. And then even though you are maybe sort of, in terms of superficial terms, excluded from talks or negotiations, you actually indirectly can still influence dynamics. And a lot of political decision-making relies much more on these indirect ties than on you being there and talking all the time.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so James, my next question for you is, how can technology improve trust and verification in conflict settings, for example, misinformation or attribution, without becoming surveillance?
So, my past experience really informs my worldview on this. Before I founded Midwatch, I was an intelligence officer for the United States. And I spent a lot of my life, fighting terrorism in particular. I've spent a lot of time in the Middle East. And so with technology, I mean, we already have the technology to do these things. But you don't see the implementation widespread. And I think it's an incentive problem, which is really, there's not a lot of profit in privacy for big corporations as well as governments. So they want to profit off of all your data. So when you give them access, when you download a new app, it says, there's always a list of permissions that they require. And you're just like, yeah, I want the service, I want the tool. I'm going to accept this. And there might be 3 pages of legal garbage, and you're just like, accept. And then you wonder why your phone is like suggesting things for you to buy and that you were just thinking about or talking about. And you're like, man, everybody kind of knows that their phones, for instance, are collecting massive amounts of data. So how do you incentivize, how do you change the entire system to make privacy profitable? The other side of that is you need regulation. So I don't know your generation, if you guys know who Edward Snowden is, but somewhere around 2011, I mean, don't quote me on it. Around that time frame, he was working as a contractor for NSA, just for those of you who don't know. And he was a part of a mass surveillance program, or at least he was aware of it, and he decided to leak that information. He was called a whistleblower by the media. The United States government called him a traitor. He fled, obviously. I believe he's still in Russia now. But what happened was people were shocked to learn that all of their cellular data was being sucked up by the NSA and used to basically surveil everyone that they're communicating with. So they're making a massive graph of a call chain, of everyone you know that's in your contact list that you've called. They would map out all of that. So Americans were outraged. So even Obama, as I understand it, he was very upset. He wanted to get Snowden. arrest him, and be a part of, the Justice Department wanted to charge him with espionage and a number of other crimes, I believe. So, but there was such like a moral outrage, like of people felt so violated that they pressed their lawmakers to create a law protecting their right to privacy, something they thought they already had, which turned out wasn't quite so strong. So they got groundswell support, and a law was passed, and as I understand, President Obama signed that law, even though he was very upset that Edward Snowden had basically exposed I think it was a multi-billion-dollar program, and these types of programs continue to exist in different forms. So you guys are actually born into a time where you're cooked. So you guys, everything you've ever done, like on an electronic instrument, has been basically recorded and mapped by big data companies, and that information is basically used to understand everything about you. And so these technologies were actually created to enable you to do things. They weren't necessarily created in malice, but my personal experience has been that we use technologies to surveil people that were never designed for that. So I can't get into it, unfortunately, but if you want that to change, you guys, your generation has to be the one to change that. So you have to get involved in politics. You have to push for regulation. You have to get legislation that turns into law, that creates regulatory bodies, that holds companies accountable, and governments. Because if it is in government's best interest to spy, to maintain the status quo.
Okay.
So,
thank you very much. That was very well said. Thank you.
And we'd like to also ask, what accountability mechanism is essential when deploying tech in fragile context? That could be insight, audits, local consent, grievance, and appeal.
Yeah, so again, companies don't really self-regulate well. So, I mean, if you're taking a test, but you also are told to give yourself a grade, and you need to get a good grade to graduate school, regardless of the answers, you're going to give yourself a passing grade, we'll say. Like, look, integrity works until it doesn't work. So you need third-party bodies that, and guys, I don't want to be regulated, but I need to be regulated. So we need third-party bodies that will audit for the people, by the people. So paid by tax dollars. You need you need the government to get involved in these things. So I'm trying to think of a good example that you guys will understand. But so my company Midwatch is creating a dual agentic AI. It has an investigator that completes the task, and it's going to think it's doing a good job. If I ask it to self-evaluate, it's going to be like, I did a great job, boss. So we create a secondary agentic AI system that is an adversarial auditor. This system is basically not the friend of the first agentic AI, and it's looking for issues. And that's still just an internal mechanism. You still need external mechanisms to ensure that technology is responsible.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and coming on to you. First, thank you for stepping in. Lovely to have you here again. And my question is, what's the biggest shift you've seen in how diplomacy is practiced today, and where can youth legitimately lead new models?
There have been so many shifts. Where do we even begin? This is such an opportunity, I feel like, for each of you in the room to write actually what the answer to this is. And I really do think that there are future diplomats in here, future politicians, builders like Arvid and Justin up here. And I really think that answer will come in time. I don't think it's really up for me to decide. I think that we're going to create it together.
Thank you so much.
And we'd also like to ask, what support structure would make youth-led diplomacy durable? Training, platforms, protection, funding, and intergenerational governance.
So do you guys remember when during COVID there were on Meta you could go into these virtual rooms? Do you remember what were they called on Facebook? They were like live rooms where you were like interacting, you were like a character in a room, and yeah, like simulations. There's a name for it, but I think frameworks like in this age of AI, what's going to be even more important is like this right here in real life, community building. So things that will like move diplomacy forward, move peace forward are honest conversations, being willing to share even when you disagree, being friends with someone who has different views than you, like traveling the world and experiencing different countries so you come to learn about others and also appreciate what you have at home. These are all like the small things that I really add up to a lot of different possibilities. And so that's where I would start with community.
Thank you very much. And Shane, I'd also like to ask you a question, is that in your field, being an entrepreneur and having startups, when did you have to implement these small skills to get over certain challenges?
Which skills?
And like the ones you mentioned, where that youth should implement communication, and that we should be friends with people that even we may disagree with.
And sometimes that can be really difficult. It can be super hard, but it's so worth it. It's so worth it because you learn so much. There's so many opportunities. I think it's even just the small passing someone in the hallway, or it's the hard conversation that you might have to have with your boss one day. You know, it's showing up in those moments and like really listening, asking questions. And I really think that whether it's diplomacy, your career, or your family, like often the quality of your questions that you're asking sometimes determine the quality of your life. And so are you asking enough questions? What are the questions that you're asking? And like, how can you begin to like tap into that curiosity? Because I think when you do that, like a lot of doors start to open and you don't have to force things. They actually like begin to come to you if you just like ask questions. And so there are so many opportunities to practice.
Thank you very much.
What excellent questions. And as I was listening to everybody, I wanted to piggyback a little bit on what Shane was saying, that what he's coming to is actually saying that diplomacy actually happens everywhere, not just in bureaucratic rooms that, you know, that we've thought about in the past. And we started earlier this week with leadership and future of health. And we said healthcare happens everywhere. And then we ended up going into education and we said education is happening everywhere. It takes a whole of society, this whole of society approach, right? And youth definitely have a seat or have a very important role to play in all of that. So the question I have for all of you, the students, are my wonderful co-moderators, our panelists, but also you in the room, is what are these rooms? What are these bodies? Is it multilateral organizations where we need more substantial youth voices at the table? Is it at the heads of companies? Where is it in society? If we take this whole of society approach, where are the rooms that this important work is happening, where students' voices need to be? It's a tough question.
Panelists, our moderators will bring the microphone to you. Put your hand up for us.
Think about where you want to be so you can make that change. I knew Maeve would be the first.
Hi, yeah, my name is Maeve Louise. A little bit of context, I'm very interested in politics and I'm considering going into either the consulting space or the private intelligence space. And I think that the place that we need youth voices the most is actually the internet. I'd say it's not any physical room. I wouldn't say it's a multilateral organization or any specific dining room or a conference room in some hotel. I think it's the internet because it can unite youth across the world. It can get past those language barriers. And yes, there's a lot of negatives to it, but I would argue that it's like the impact it has as a unifying force is much more important.
I'll just piggyback on her. I think augmented reality has a lot of opportunity. And actually at Rosenberg, we developed the Rosenberg Metaverse. And I think that there's so much potential for that space where not just students, but also experts can come together and to create in the augmented reality and test things out that they wouldn't normally test out on Earth, and with doing it in a sustainable way. But yeah.
Perhaps one of our panelists want to react to this question?
Yeah, why not? Okay. So this is a little bit of a practical sort of idea, because one of the problems that we encountered, excuse me, when I was building this system that I told you, which is essentially a platform for people to communicate that come from completely different backgrounds, completely different cultures, who knows where they're from, and like trying to bring them together, to think together about a problem. I guess this is a typical sort of problem of diplomacy as well, of any kind of human society coming together. So how do you find a common denominator, right? So that these people can bond with each other, given that they come from completely different backgrounds. Some are tall, some are short, some are rich, some are poor, whatever, right? So that was a sort of a question we had. How do we solve for that problem? So we did some little research, and there's some really interesting research about values that people share across cultures. Okay, and that kind of unlocked it for us. Okay, because no matter who you are and where you're from, there's some things that, you know, we're all human beings. Okay, so there's some things that we value across cultures. So that kind of unlocked it for us, okay? And we use that in order to build algorithms that match people according to those value systems, so that we can have communities that can have those meaningful and productive collaborations. So that's an example of how, so we started with a question, we did the research, and then we applied a technical solution that comes, in this case, from AI and data, in order to provide a solution that did not exist before, okay? To solve, hopefully, a problem. Okay, so I hope that's an insight.
Yes.
Microphone.
Hello, my name is Sophia, and just to also give you a brief background, I think technology is really important right now as well, and using it ethically is really important. And I'm really passionate about medicine and healthcare, and I think that there's a variety of ways we could use technology to contribute to more equal access to healthcare with inequality or maybe misunderstanding of certain diagnoses. And I think that there's still a lot of things that should be done, and I think that technology could be a source as well to provide more equal healthcare, because I think that soon enough technology may do a lot of the things that people do, like, for example, determine diagnoses. And I think that we also should just use it ethically and sustainably in the process.
We actually talked about this earlier this week with the World Health Organization and some private sector partners, that technology is the great equalizer. You know, if you're spending only 5 hours, by research, you're spending only 5 hours a year with your doctor, doing self-care can help close that gap. So it's great, and we talked a little bit yesterday in Tech and Society Day about the promise of technology in equalizing and bringing more accessibility. But I was also thinking about what George was saying earlier in terms of values and ideas and what brings people together. So for the last decade and a half, I've been coming to Davos to think about searching for common ground. We're a diplomatic organization, so we are looking for how everyone, what are the values and ideas that bring very different people, very different thought leaders together. So for you, I have a bit of a challenge, the students and the guests and also our panelists. Tell me only one word, which might be hard, that one thing that could bring someone who's not a friend, I'm not going to say enemy, but I'm going to say someone you wouldn't normally be friends with or wouldn't be seen together with. What could that be, that one thing that could be just universal, a common thing that you could find ground and opportunity to have a conversation with.
Also links nicely with the Rosenberg Youth Manifesto we're collecting throughout the week.
That's right.
There's a lot of those terms, things that can help us find that common ground.
Yeah.
And bring together in a very sort of like age zero way, across ages, across disciplines, across interest fields.
I'll make
those relationships.
I'll make it easy. I'll tell you what my idea is. It's food. You can always but you can always bring people together with food. No matter what, enemies will sit together. If they're hungry, they'll figure out a way to sit together.
Perfect. What do you think brings people together, no matter what? Think about why some of you are here today too, as well. We have one here. Yeah.
I feel like what brings people together is when people speak their minds out and give their ideas. Like, for example, books.
Yeah.
And media. Like, there's so much media everywhere.
Food and books.
And not much people talk about it. So I think that really brings together people. And, like, no one would know that you read books if you don't say that, for example. So, yeah, I think talking about the media, talking about what you saw online today, or what you saw pretty much is really important, yeah.
I'm going to cheat a little bit and say two things. They're two words, though. Smiling and crying. I think they're universal to all cultures, and no matter if you don't speak the same language as someone, if you give them a smile, it's a connection.
I would say something that brings people together is adversity, going through something difficult together.
Yeah, I was going to throw fear in there. So shared adversary, and the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So yeah, it works. And actually, politicians are very effective at that with rhetoric. If you see Trump, that's actually how he wins elections, through the populist votes. He's like, the immigrants are coming, and you know.
We said one word though, James.
Emotions. More words.
I like that. That's
we
what.
had food. We had books. We had crying, laughing. We have one here. A word.
Yeah. It's gonna
One
sound
word.
a bit cheesy, but love.
Yes.
Yes.
And I don't mean as in loving each other, also as in like everyone loves something. Could be sports or anything.
Sports. Yes.
Music.
Yes. Music. Yes.
And for me personally, I would like to add on to Maeve's point. I also think a smile, just like exchanging a smile between someone, is something that's, I think, can build and foster relationships in today's society. And maybe they might not be like deep relationships or like friendships, but I think that in an age of social media, parasocial relationships are so common that we sometimes forget how much a little smile or like a little laugh with someone that you may not see every day really important is.
Bravo. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
One word.
I think vulnerability
Yes.
could be one, because I think there's kind of this thing where everyone tries to build a facade that they're succeeding in life, that they always know what they're doing, which of course a lot of people do, but not always. And I want to touch on the same point of adversity and challenges, that often you try to look like you're achieving something, but when you're actually vulnerable with that person and you're telling them actually how you feel and that I'm struggling too and they're struggling too, you can kind of touch on the same point of adversity and challenge.
And humanity.
Yeah.
One more. Dylan?
One word that I think is good is empathy, because on an emotional level, I would say everyone here is able to connect with one another emotionally and psychologically.
Yeah, and one word, I would say curiosity, because it's like seek for understanding each other, etc.
So, I mean, what you've described with words is emotions, experiences, really. What we're doing right now is an experience. So experiencing something together, whether it's positive or negative, which is, apropos of the discussion we had about war and peace and conflict, we're not looking to eradicate conflict because conflict is part of life. We're trying to use conflict in a way that's constructive so that we don't get to war. So these experiences that you're describing are the kinds of things that build that rapport, that common ground that we're searching for. So if I may would you like to maybe, Gerhard, just tell me how much time we have left?
If there's one more point that somebody wants to make from the
Yes,
circle, but I
Arvid.
think next year would close the circle.
Always makes me nervous about time.
Absolutely, don't worry about time.
So I think one thing that I find important when you work in the diplomatic space is that sometimes people take your organizations on. Sometimes maybe we are like underselling a little bit how difficult that work is, and that it's actually a skill you can learn. So what I mean by that is, and I don't want to go against anything that people said. Everything is probably correct. Empathy, and my word would be listening, right? Understanding the other side. The problem I sometimes have with that is it can very quickly, and don't take this too harsh, it can sound a little bit too abstract. It sounds a bit too fluffy, okay? And the opposite is true, okay? And so the way I think about diplomacy, if you break it down into what diplomacy actually is, right, like fostering consensus through communication, negotiation, is one of the most difficult things in the world if you want to do it right, if you want to bring people together, because you're talking about war and peace. Now let's look at, very quickly, let's look at other professions where we would all say it's high stakes, it's very difficult to do, and we only want the best people to do it, okay? So that's think about it this way. So think about heart surgeons, pilots, special forces, right? So all of these people have some things in common. So first of all, they strive for excellence. They never stop training and preparing. And they never think they're like the smartest person in the room who has already seen it all. And unfortunately, sometimes in the diplomatic space, you have a lot of people running around who, like I give you this one example, a friend of mine is a very smart woman who works at the highest level of diplomacy in one specific country, which I will not name, and she's often complaining to me that there are so many men, usually she says, and they're just talking all the time. They're not really listening, right? They're not really applying like the art and science of diplomacy to the actual work. And so maybe one takeaway I would have for everyone in this room is, if you want to work in diplomacy, think of it as like a call, like to action, but you can break it down into specific things you can actually learn. Someone said like immersive environments or immersive training, right? Training, preparation, even if you start with like Model UN, is a very good thing, right? And we really need to look at people who solve these practical questions of war and peace through diplomacy. We need to look at them as people who are doing some of the hardest jobs in the world, right? And we should hold them to those standards. And if you are entering this field, you should also set these high standards for yourself, because it's one of the most important professions you can have in this very dangerous world, unfortunately.
I love that Arvid thinks that my job is difficult. I'm sorry that I made you think it was easy. But I did want to just bring us to a conclusion by saying very quickly that I recently had the opportunity to interview a paleoanthropologist. Do you guys know what a paleoanthropologist does? I wish I had known, because that would have been a great job for me. But just going around and studying our ancestors, where in the evolution of humanity. And I asked her a question at an AI conference on stage, and I said, what makes us human? What are the skills that we can teach everyone, the human skills in the AI era? And she said, these skills that we're talking about, that deal with emotions, deal with collaborations, finding common ground. These are things that we don't even have to learn. We have inherited them from our ancestors. It's exactly what makes us human. So indeed, it's a difficult thing. We somehow have retrained our brains to not do it naturally, but this is what helped us survive and become the dominant species on this planet. So exercise what comes naturally to you, and you will succeed in whatever career you choose. So with that said, thank you so much. Thank you to our wonderful moderators.
Thank you. I also want to thank all of you for coming here and sharing your perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.